Hi, and welcome to the Green with Tiffany podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Page, and in this show, we'll explore topics of sustainable living, all aspects of health and wellness, of people and planet, and how we're all interconnected. Join us on this journey to live better and more sustainably by improving our health, our families, and the world with the choices that we make. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Green with Tiffany. I am happy to be here and excited to share on a topic that is very close to my heart. It's plastic pollution. And we have here Angela's Sun. She is a journalist and a producer correspondent and the documentary filmmaker of a film that I really think shaped where we are today because it was called is called Plastic Paradise, The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Welcome, Angela's Sun, a very good friend of mine. So happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Tiff, for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And Angela's a new mom, and I'm so happy you're able to take some time away to be with us. Since we're talking about plastic pollution and Plastic Free July is this month, what have you found to be kind of some of your biggest challenges with a newborn and plastic?
Gosh, everything. Everything is a challenge as a new mom. But furthermore, when you think about how much plastic goes into baby products, it's even more frightening. And to see even like with diapers is a big one. There's this push with compostable or bamboo diapers. And upon further research, as I've done with my film and learning about all the different types of plastics that actually can be recycled, can be composted or whatnot, there's a lot of greenwashing involved, especially in the baby products that I use as well. And so when you think you're spending a premium to buy like the best bamboo compostable diaper that's not going to harm the environment or more environmentally friendly or green, it actually isn't, because it still needs to be heated at a certain facility. It has to be treated in a certain way. Like, it really just ends up in the landfill a lot of the times, which is unfortunate. And then you have, this balance that you're trying to find with, well, do you use reusable diapers? Because then there's all the water involved and the cleaning agents to actually clean it, and cost benefit, what's better for the environment and better for your little one's bum, So
Right.
learning all of these things as a whole. It's like Pandora's box of things you can learn about. And that's just diapers, not including even right now I'm exclusively pumping, which is another term I learned about, which is somewhere in between formula and breastfeeding, where you're actually feeding them breast milk, but not nursing. And there's so many parts and most of them are plastic. And I use glass bottles, but inside I use the Dr. Brown's, and like the inside vent is plastic. And then I have a sterilizer, but do I use the sterilizer because that could leach out? They say that everything's BPA free right now, but you and I both know that that's just semantics, right? Because bisphenol A is just one component of things that could leach out from plastic. So of course it could say it's BPA free, but what about BPF or BP, whatever they didn't name? So there's no labeling in the types of plastic. So what we do know is if you heat it to hot temperatures, it can leach. And so I definitely chose glass bottles, but again, like all the other components of it are still plastic there are parts that are plastic, like the collar and the little cap, and all the pump parts are plastic. And I tried actually using glass containers to hold the milk, but it kept falling because the glass is so heavy. So unless you sit there and not move, the whole point of the portability of that is taken away if you add the glass component. So there's a lot. And that's just two things.
That's a lot. And just to underline what you just said, heated plastic is the most toxic. Heated plastic, it leaches. But, and you're someone in the know, right? You're in the know of things, and it's hard to navigate. So can you imagine how the average person who, is maybe being introduced to trying to use less plastic and trying to navigate their way through, and then the greenwashing, like, what do you do? That's just so complicated. So you really have to maybe find somebody who knows more, or follow brands that are doing it right from the start. And maybe that's all they do versus, a brand that does a little bit of green here, but then, does mainstream stuff over here.
Just to close up on that, I feel like everyone kind of just slaps like a green leaf on something and says, look, it's eco, or like this is, they add the able at the end, like compostable, recyclable, but it's not actually like made from post-consumer plastic. It's not made from our old plastic because that's too hard to do because it's volatile materials and there's all different types, right? So it's not going to be proper, especially for a baby to use that. But anything that's a bowl, compostable, recyclable, doesn't mean anything except for that, hey, you can do this. It's not like it's actually, it's still introducing virgin plastics in,
Right.
so
And it's
it's not,
possible, but probably not
yeah,
probable.
possible. Exactly. Yes, exactly. But yes, so, and this all started, I started learning about this from my film, which you had mentioned, and that's actually how we met. I was thinking, I was like, well, how do
Yes.
we meet? I was like, we met through the film, and we met when you were, I think we had talked on a lot of different panels and different events and stuff.
Yeah, I think South by Southwest Eco, which was such a
Hmm.
great event. I don't think it exists anymore, but that's where we met. And you were just tireless on this film. It's so interesting because how long did it take to actually make the film? 5 years?
It took me, well, I took breaks in between. So one of the hardest things about creating a independent documentary film is that, well, A, you just got to believe in yourself and keep doing it. But B, you got to find financing and funding. And it's pretty hard to do that for something like plastics, especially when people didn't really know about what was going on with plastics. But it's not sexy. It's not cute panda bears. It's not like tigers. It's not like Tiger King. There's no like hook. It's literally this boring thing that's everywhere that's plastic. But I felt like the story needed to be told because it was everywhere, right? And we come in contact with it every single day of our lives. Most people in first through third world, I mean, developing nations for sure, come in contact with plastic at some point every day of our lives, unless you live in Papua New Guinea in the highlands.
Was it your love of the ocean that inspired it, or what? I mean, because there wasn't a lot of information out there when you were doing this. Like, what set you off on the journey that I have to show this?
I think I got inspired by hearing about it through a news article back in 2006 or seven. I was like, what? There's some patch in the ocean of plastic. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind that everyone thinks about is this floating island of trash, like something that you can stand on and everything. And so that sparked the curiosity. And then through the years, so I was working full time for Al Gore's network, which is now defunct, but current TV at the time. And then I, got in touch with NOAA and did the whole like researching and going through the red tape of applying for applications and everything, and not knowing how to make a documentary because I didn't come from that. I came from TV, and also I never went to film school or anything, so I didn't know what I was doing. So just kind of like asking people for favors and asking friends for information or pulling resources together. And then finally had an opportunity, like this tiny little window, to go out to Midway Atoll and go and shoot this thing. And so you kind of like take a giant leap of faith, put things on a credit card, and hope that your friend that you worked with at MTV once in a blue moon like was able to come with, and finagled that. And it was definitely a trip of a lifetime that really set everything into motion. And then how to tell that story as we crafted it as it came back was such a learning curve for me as a producer and writer. And I think I never wanted to be part of the story. I wanted to just tell the story straight, but plastic is kind of pretty boring, right? Like, unless there's some sort of personal connection. So my connection is, yeah, I've always loved the oceans, and that curiosity when I heard about this floating island of trash, I had to go out there and check it out. And then you kind of just go, like, no pun intended, but you dive too deep, right? Like you're deep in there and you're just like, I just got to go hit the bottom, and I got to like unpeel all the layers of the onion and let people know what's going on, because there's so much that we don't know, or just the mainstream media wouldn't even put out there because it's not something we think about.
And there's no going back once you know. And that's such a visual. And I think that was the big deal when around the same time as when I started hearing about this Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And what does that look like? It's an island. Can you stand on it? I just wanted to see it. And there were no pictures at the time. You couldn't find photos of anything. And so your movie was such a visual because you pull up to this island and you can actually elaborate a little bit more exactly where that is. And you just see all this plastic, and it's really, the visuals so shocking. Where is Midway Atoll exactly?
So it's midway point between Japan and the US in the North Pacific. So that's one of the gyres. So we learned later that obviously you were introduced and a part of 5 gyres expeditions. And they were starting out at that time as well, but that there's 5 gyres of plastic, sort of vortexes in the ocean that are like these bathtubs that don't drain, but there's just these doldrums where there's no currents. And so Midway Atoll is in between the Pacific in between Asia and the California coast, the west coast of the United States. And it's 4 hours north of the main Hawaiian Islands, but it's part of the Hawaiian Island chain. So when I went there, it wasn't even a marine monument. President Obama afterwards went over and made Papahanaumokuakea a national marine monument. So now it's protected. But because of the way the currents are, it was like the fine-tooth comb that collected all of the trash from the gyre. So it's actually, I believe it's like a little south of the actual like eye of the gyre. But when like there still are no pictures of it because you can't really see pictures of it, right? Well, I mean, you can get there, but I remember Billabong wanted to do something and they wanted to fly their seaplane and they flew around and I was like, there's no point because you're not going to get that crazy visual. But where I was at, that's where all of the stuff ended up. And that's where a lot of, the north sides of the Hawaiian island chain, even the main ones, that's where a lot of it ends up. And Camilo Beach in the Big Island, actually, there's a lot that washes up there as well. And they've done a lot from the state side to deal with that. But again, as it washes up on the beaches, one thing you can do is collect it and then they bring it to the incinerator. So that's also off-gassing a lot of, different chemicals and such. But it's kind of when we see things like the ocean cleanup and what they're doing, or like people trying to go and rake the ocean, I don't think people understand how massive this giant big blue planet that we live on really is, and that we are just this tiny speck. And if, more than 80% of the earth is covered with water, like you can't just rake through it. Like you can't just take a broom or like a rake and just kind of collect all the plastic without killing all the wildlife, without, and it's deep in the water column with it's miles deep. So I think because we know more about the moon than the sea, like there's still so much more left to discover and uncover. But I think that's also why there's no like red alarm, like send the smoke signals that like we are literally choking our oceans of plastic, right? Because we can't see it.
Yes. And I appreciate the efforts to try and clean up or take care of something after the fact, but 14 million tons of plastic are going into the ocean every year. That's just insane. And it's just growing. They say the number of plastic production is going up by 40% in the next handful of years. So, yes, it's better than, I guess, nothing, but it's almost like there's my guy's dad, he had a saying, if you always keep your room clean, then you never have to clean your room. So it's almost like you have to shut it off before it gets to the ocean. We have to make the change. We need to find solutions versus just trying to clean it up, because obviously, like you said, it's not going to work. I mean, that was the Pacific Gyre, and I went to the North Atlantic Gyre, and we sailed from Bermuda to Iceland. It was like 3,000 miles and a very unknown trail that we took, and we did samples and just on the surface. So we're not even talking about what's below the surface. And in every single sample, I think we did 32 samples, it had little microplastics in it. And to the average person, that might be like, oh, so what's the big deal? It's not a big deal. It's just little pieces of plastic. It's nothing visually shocking, but it's almost worse, because how do you fix that if it's in the most remote areas? So
I think that's why people don't understand the gravity of the situation. Until like, when are we going to finally realize that this is a massive, massive problem, that anything that happens on the ocean will affect everything that happens on land? I just did a story on dinoflagellates and the phytoplankton, and how phytoplankton is one of the biggest carbon sinks in the world. They suck in that greenhouse gas, but at the same time, like those algae blooms that we're seeing is because of warming oceans, right? There's so many issues that are going around our oceans, rising sea levels, temperature rises, the plastic smog that's in there, that until we have people, I don't know how to get people to understand except for to do it through media and do it through experiencing things and then sharing about those experiences, which is what I did with Plastic Paradise. Is like it became personal, right? But because plastic is such a ubiquitous material and in our everyday mundane lives, it should become personal for all of us, right? It's just, how do we get people activated enough? And I think that through media, whether it be social, whether it be through a film, whether it be through snail mail or whatever, like what I've seen change throughout the time that I started doing this, and from the time that we've met too, is this bell curve of this next generation that's super activated, and this youth that have this like climate anxiety because they're like, it's, they call it eco anxiety, I guess, that they are carrying the burden of our problems, of what the last generations have done. And especially now with the whole, I don't want to get into it, but the Supreme Court now blocking the EPA from certain things.
Yeah,
and that's a whole another bag of
that's a whole other
worms,
topic,
to
because
open.
plastic has, and what goes into play a little bit with that, for plastic is oil. Plastic comes from fossil fuel. So, if we're moving to a place of more electric vehicles, more hybrid vehicles, gas prices are going up, less fuel. Well, these companies still want to make money. So what are they going to do? Well, they can make more plastic. There's no shortage of need for plastic. And the single-use plastic is what makes them money. So it's just pushed forward. And, plastic obviously is a great material, and it helps a lot of people with a lot of things. So I don't want to dismiss plastic for the uses that it has. So I just wanted to be really clear, for people who are kind of just getting involved with plastic pollution and what that means. It's really the single use plastics. It's, the water bottle that's 8 ounces that you drink out of, you finish it and you throw it away and there's no away, or the grocery bags or the produce bags, or your utensils. But now, since your film, there has been all these ordinances that are going into place all over the world, which is so amazing. But it's taken, think about how much time it's taken to get to this place. Better late than never.
Over a decade. And you think about it the same way. Well, if we think about it like the way we saw smoking ordinances, people used to smoke in planes. They used to smoke in restaurants, then they realized the health risks. I know, right? Now we think like, oh my God, that was so shocking. I think the younger generation is like, what? You used to put things in a plastic bag, or you never carried your own water bottle? That's so weird. At least the activated youth that we know, or that I know that I'm around. But it is striking to me when I travel and go to different parts of our country or abroad, when it is still very typical to have plastic bottles everywhere, plastic water bottles. And the cutlery is huge, especially with the pandemic. People have been even more like, oh, obviously with COVID, we want to be sanitary, and we can't take your to-go-ware and put to-go stuff in there if we're delivering food or whatnot, right? But there's certain tips and stuff that, and the masks, the disposable masks that are all over the place,
masks
right?
Are terrible. It's like one of the worst things, probably. I wonder how many we've thrown away over the last couple of years.
Millions. Hundreds of millions. But I do think that you can still be mindful within that time, within that parameters that we have, but it is a daily thing. And so I think one of the things that I'd encourage people to do is, from a tip standpoint, is just to think of progress over perfection and just try to start small. And from that, I think starting small and sharing what you're doing with somebody, I think, because that gives you that accountability, because you're like, not that you have to be like some green crusader, but if you tell someone, it becomes real, right? Like, it's kind of like, if you didn't post it, did it really happen? But, just even if you just tell someone, you don't have to like shout it from the social media mountaintops. But I do feel like that solidifies that you are doing something for yourself mentally. At least for me, that works. And since it's Plastic-Free July.
It's Plastic-Free July.
It's the perfect time to start it. And I love that it started Australia has been a huge country that has pushed things forward as well. And being a smaller, well, 20 million plus population too, they're pretty activated because most of them are on the coast. Like 80% of the population there lives on the coast. And so they see it. For us, unless you live on the coast, how do you care or how do you see it if it's inland, right?
Well, I think people think that they're recycling, so they're doing their part. And I think it's just a misnomer. Unfortunately, I lived in a place before I moved to where I am where all trash went in one bin and then they pulled out the recyclables, which I never thought would work anyway. So I would make sure my recyclables, I would take them, the ones that I had, and I would take them to the recycling center to make sure they weren't contaminated or anything. And now that's even less what they'll take back because they don't even take a lot of the recyclables. So everything you think of your plastic that's going in now, I have the blue bin, the recycling bin. It's like 90+% of what you think is being recycled is not being recycled. I mean, just a small amount is being recycled. And if you think about how much waste we create every day, we can't keep up with that. There's not enough. We don't need that much material to recycle, right? To make into new products that are not going to be what they were before. So, like you were talking about what we were doing before with our plastic waste, which we're not doing anymore. But that wasn't a solution either, if you wanted to speak on that.
Yeah, so basically in 2018, like China decided to shut the doors on the US because our biggest export to China was actually our trash, which is crazy because we import so much from China. And obviously the trade has been affected through the pandemic with the backlog of things. And I thought that was really interesting that basically they clamped down this iron curtain so that they're like, we are not your dumping ground for the world. And so they just shut it down. And so certain countries, especially in Europe, had to come up with other ideas. And how do you deal with, especially if you don't have any land and your landfills are full, like what are you going to do with this trash, and coming up with innovative ways to deal with that. But in the US, our trash basically, until we put value in something, like intrinsic value into our trash, like one man's trash is another person's treasure, and create and innovate products that can, be reused. I just spoke to somebody. I did a story on using single-use plastic trash as our building blocks for building homes, which is really such a unique idea. And I feel like until we have those ideas put into motion, it's definitely piling up and taking up a lot of that landfill space. I've been to MRF, seen what can be recycled and what can't, and it is true, they hand pick out all the things, especially during the pandemic. A lot of these smaller recyclers, I interviewed another smaller recycler that was local, and they were saying it's hard to make ends meet because, they don't value it as much and they don't take as much because what can you make from that single use that's made to be used once, besides using the PET, which is number one, which is mainly water bottles, or the milk jugs are number two. Like, who really looks at the bottom of your plastic things except for me and you, probably, and some really other activated, but like individuals, and you got to rinse it out and everything. Right. And so, when people think that, oh, I'll just throw my pizza box in there, it's compostable. Now your pizza box can go into your compost pile, which is really neat and interesting. And I think with California's new compost law going into effect, where the state is mandating that there be compost bins everywhere, but then leaving it to local jurisdictions to figure it out, it's kind of going the way of, waste in general, whether it be food waste or plastic waste or whatnot. These local ordinances are really what's going to kind of push that needle. But what pushes that is voters, right? Because the voters, we vote in our local city councils and stuff, and we're the ones who are pushing for that change or pushing for certain things. And I think even though our plastic is not getting recycled very much, like I believe it's less than 8 to 6%. I know for the world, it is less than 8% of plastic gets recycled, but
it's actually terrifying.
right? I know, it's like something, but really, is it something? At least in our own local ways, we can start by buying local, I went and did a story on a refill station, going zero waste, like all the things that you talk about on Green with Tiffany. Those are great tips. And I think it just takes a little activation on our parts. And honestly, I think it's the younger generation that motivates the older, right? So when I think about it, and now even more so being a new mom, I'm like, oh, I need to protect this for him because my little guy is going to grow up one day and have to deal with all this mess, you know?
Be
So,
like Wally with all the trash. Ah.
oh, I know.
I think the good news, I'm just kind of looking at notes because there are so many ordinances, and I'm not going to go over what each one is, but the fact that they've passed the Assembly Bill 2026 is now going to state Senate, I think, and it's for e-commerce packaging, like inside. That's amazing. I didn't even know that was happening. And there's now something about the produce bags. There's the ban on, you have to ask. Before, we started with the straw, and you have to ask for straws now, but now you have to ask for the condiments or the utensils, and McDonald's is doing a big push with that, which is amazing because I think McDonald's, it's hard to pinpoint just one company that made this difference. But if you think about single-use plastics, and I know that or disposable plastics, that you have a little bit in your film about where it came from and when it started, which was great little tip on history. But I watched that movie, The Founder, and it was about the McDonald's and where they were used to be serving their things on actual plates with actual cutlery. And then they moved to these disposables. But everybody was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And of course, how could you foresee back then, like where it would go and how far it would go? But now we
Right.
need to figure out how to get back to what we were doing before, which was
Right.
reusables and things that aren't just being used for a short time and then being thrown away, and then there's no away, and it lasts forever and ever.
On a side note, like when I was out at Midway, Conservation International was there and their board was there. And one of the people on the board was the owner of Walmart or the CEO or whatever. He was like the top dog at Walmart. And there was all these sort of like top dogs from these corporations from around the world. And I was like, wow, this group could really change the world literally by just banning the plastic bag from all of your stores or the big box stores or whatnot, right? And so I think it takes the push against big corporations to really do that, whether it be a McDonald's or a Walmart or whatever it is. And it also, as much as a consumer can do that we can do as voters and, voting with our wallet and whatnot, I do think that we need to push for those laws that are going to regulate those corporations that are in the interest of, cheap product and just churning and burning to be able to really amplify and push that needle. But what I do think is I look back at the smoking stuff and what's going on with health and the smoking bans and stuff. And then I think, okay, we can do it. We can push back on big tobacco. We can push back on big plastic and big oil. It just takes that nudge and I see it. I see it in the younger generations. I see it in the teens that are super activated, and the people that I've worked with really get fired up, and the nonprofits that are popping up that are doing a lot.
They're doing a lot. And I find when they all come together and work together, they move the needle so much more too. A banded togetherness. They just effort. They really get it done. So that's been really impressive to watch. What I did notice though, and I feel like the American Chemistry Council is pretty crafty, and they're the ones that oversee plastic use. And so at Target, they now have plastic bags. So here we have a plastic bag ban on single-use plastic bags, which they did, but they brought in a much heavier, thicker weighted plastic bag. And I just couldn't believe it. And so I go to do some research, and I realize that it's now not considered single use because it's so thick and heavy that it's a reusable bag. So you almost have to be careful what you put out there, and you have to make sure to try and be 10 steps ahead of what they're going to do to retaliate because they don't want to stop making their plastic. And now these bags have they're even thicker. They use more plastic. I mean, okay, maybe people are using them more, but there's quite a few that are probably just, they bring their stuff home, they empty it, they throw it in the trash. Or maybe they use it as a trash liner and then they throw it in the trash. But it's a really thick bag. Have you seen this bag?
I've seen it. And I remember them coming out with it. Yeah, I remember them coming out with it. And I thought that was like, okay, that's an interesting workaround. But that's what I mean with actually being a new mom and dealing with the bisphenol A situation. I think until we have labeling and until we have laws where these plastic makers need to label what is actually in the chemicals that make up what they're making, it's going to be really hard to kind of prove and hold them accountable unless you could freak them out. Like, when I found out there was bisphenol A in receipt paper
That
and
was such
that
a
it
big
kind
one
of
for me. I didn't
leaches.
know that.
Yeah. And then it's because the receipt paper is soft and it's kind of like, you could feel the film on your hands if you're doing your taxes and kind of have all your receipts together. I mean, now everything's digital, but back in the day when we were sorting through and putting things in envelopes and whatnot, or the clerk at the store who's working 8-hour shifts and dealing with receipts and touching that every day with people. Obviously, the pandemic really changed everything, and a lot of things are contactless. Then there's the idea of all the takeout food and the containers, that people, the Instacarts, the Amazons, the on-demand, the packaging. The packaging is everything, right? So I really enjoy buy nothing groups on Facebook. I feel like that's the best part of Facebook, for the older people who might be listening. For the younger people who don't have Facebook and are on TikTok, I would say, I don't know if there's a buy nothing group there, but buy nothing groups, I think that community shared economy idea that gives life to things that would be thrown away usually.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I have friends that love it. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, I really think glass is the way to go, at least for a lot of the baby products, that if you can. I'm not too sure. I haven't done so much research on silicone things, like if the silicone leaches. But I know silicone is another alternative, like the stasher bags, and using silicone to hold things, even to freeze breast milk. 'Cause that is my life right now, every 3 hours. And the diapers one is really hard. But I do feel like I'm not trying to justify any decision, but I just think all decisions are hard. And that's why I keep saying progress over perfection, because we're all works in progresses and we're all trying. So at least like the fact that you try is better than nothing.
For sure. And just even the awareness of, knowing about these things, like when the pandemic hit, I mean, so many things changed that you were able to do before. You couldn't bring your reusable bags in. You'd have to,
Yeah.
you'd have to use the bags they gave. So I did that. And I'll give tips. We can give tips at the end, but there were other ways to do things. And then you even wanted to use a produce bag because everybody's touching everything. And you're like, with COVID, you don't
Yeah.
want anyone to touch anything. So you would use a bag and, grab it with the plastic bag. So, and then of course, like you mentioned, the mask. So it's hard. And then even I ended up making my coffee every day at home, which was a blessing because I've lived to do that now. But I would go out once in a while before and get coffee or have it for here, right? So I'd have it in a mug, but then that went away.
Oh, and they
So
don't
the
do
only way to
that.
get
Yeah.
coffee was to go. And then you couldn't ask for no lid because they put it all, that's the way they're doing things because of COVID. So really, we took a giant step back on some things.
Yeah. I make my own coffee now too. It's much cheaper.
Yeah, it was great. And I actually prefer it now. So yeah, much cheaper as
Yeah.
well. Like you said, there were good things about it and bad. And I think the best thing is there are so many bills that have gone through, like I just even around the country, like France they're putting into effect, their cutlery and plates and cups. That was in beginning of 2020. And now they're going to put into effect a single-use plastic packaging for the sale of like 30 types of fruits and vegetables. And that happened this year of January. I didn't, some places you go, bananas are wrapped in plastic and you're like, why? It has
Trader
its own.
Joe's.
Do they have that? I don't go to Trader Joe's, but
Oh yeah, Trader Joe's has a lot of things wrapped in plastic that are unnecessary. Yeah, that have their own layer. Like nobody needs get the bananas wrapped in plastic, or
crazy.
oranges wrapped in saran wrap on a styrofoam plate or something like that.
It probably made
But
people feel more comfortable in COVID. I get that, but I think we can move past that now, right? I hope.
But the Asian stores too, a lot of the Asian stores they still do that, the bigger stores. But I think in general, like it is very hard. And I think I was, encouraged that when I visited the Sustain LA Zero Waste station, it's the first refillable station for household products and sort of beauty products, or some beauty products, in East LA. But then while I did some more research, there's a couple of zero waste stores, at least in different places, like in San Diego or in the Bay Area or whatnot. You really have to seek those out. You really got to be activated to seek those out, to take your empty bottles with you to go there, or your glass mason jars to go there to fill it too. That's a whole nother thing. But the act of doing so and making it fun and just the small action of doing something like that has huge repercussions if we can all do that. But, at least for me, I feel like the peace of mind of doing my part and trying to do that. And I do save all my little, like, even the beauty jars and stuff, the big shampoo things. And so I have like a little stash of my bulk shampoo empty bottles that I'm going to go and take to the refill station, try to refill. And a lot of these places that buy in bulk, they're very meticulous about their sourcing. So they show all the ingredients, what goes in there, and that it's all natural and stuff. So I think that's been really nice to know too, that you could trust the sourcing.
Yes, well, definitely. I'm sure we'll have more of that. But I just went to one in Highland Park as well. It was very cool.
Wait, is that the one
so passionate?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and I think the more that there are, the better. Because why not support local, like wherever it is?
And everybody's at a different place where they're starting. So, if you want to get involved, I think the best thing you can do, I mean, you can try and switch out some of your easier things, like a grocery bag. You can get involved with your voice. Some of the nonprofits that I really like are Gyres for their citizen scientist efforts that you can learn about. And there's also Habits of Waste. And they have a great way to get involved with the different bills that are out there. So you can, sign the petitions and be part of it, which is huge. And then plasticfreejuly.org, that was started by, like you mentioned, Rebecca Prince Ruiz. They have a little quiz on there that you can take to see where you are and kind of start, start from something.
And Surfrider is a great one. Surfrider does a lot of advocacy with the legislation,
which I think is so important. This is what we're seeing right now. We started with the straw. I mean, I never really used straws anyway, but that was such a huge effort. And then that opens the doors to all the other ones that are coming. And now even, when you order food online from one of the apps, now there's a little button where you opt in if you want utensils, but by default, you actually have to opt in. You don't get it, which I think is great. You have to ask for it, because if you're having your food delivered at home, I mean, I guess some people would prefer to just have plastic so they don't have to wash a fork. But I mean, isn't it just nicer to eat from a real fork and not throw away a piece of plastic that you don't need to? So there are lots of changes. Canada just put a ban of single-use plastics to go into effect, I think, at the end of 2023. So it's happening, girl. This is exciting.
It's happening.
And you were at the forefront, like traveling the world.
Oh, man.
Now, when you traveled, because I know you went so many places, and I just so wanted to hop on a plane and go with you to one of them and, see all the different film festivals that you went to. But you spoke about the film. What was the response then? Like, were people in the know? Were they like, wow, I had no idea. Thank you so much. Like, what'd you get?
I think it was a lot of like, oh, that really opened up my eyes. It was in a time before the straws was a big thing. It was a little ahead of its time. Like, it was on Netflix a little bit before Netflix became the like only place people watched things.
Right.
That was like 2015 to 2017 it was on. And I think, yeah, like it kind of was a little ahead of the curve, but I was like, well, I'd rather be a little ahead than behind, right?
Right.
In what I'm doing. But it was nice
also
to be
lead a pathway. That was such a big deal.
It was nice to be a little part. I was like a little part of the pathway, because there was also many other films, like Baggett was one that was before my film that I learned about. And actually, there wasn't that many before. It was like, I saw I'm like, let me think about it. I saw Baggett, and then, all these other new organizations popped up afterwards. And so I think, that was super encouraging. But I'd like to think that Plastic Paradise was a little part in the push for change in the beginning of the bell curve. And then we kind of kept to keep the groundswell going, right? I mean, we just got to keep on keeping on. And I think that's something that I commend you for doing. You've been going green with Tiffany for quite some time as well. Like, you got to keep on keeping on, because the trends will come and go. And Earth Day may be the Super Bowl for eco warriors and environmentalists and such, but it should be Earth Day every day. And it should not be just a plastic free July or no plastic November or whatever. Like, it should be an everyday thing that we think about. And, we could use these like weird national holiday things like National Hot Dog Day or whatever, as to catapult us to, World Environment Day, World Oceans Day. There's all these days, but I really think that it should be Earth Day every day, and we should think about it in small, impactful, but meaningful ways, at least personally, that we can take away and take home and do something about.
Yes. Well, I commend you for choosing to care in this arena at a time where it was sort of new information, and to continue on with it. I mean, you did a lot of tireless travel getting this film seen and out there.
I feel like I was like, why did I do that, man? Like seriously. But I think what kept me going, because it wasn't the money for sure. I mean, I definitely did not make any money on this film. I was just trying to break even from the expenses. I think the opportunity and seeing like kids' faces light up, or like being like, wow, I watched your film in my class and it totally made me want to go to marine science or change their thinking or something. Even that one person or that one
Yeah.
nugget of inspiration, like I feel like, wow, okay, I feel like that's given me some purpose, and, you know, didn't ask to be the plastic police or the, with my family or like, the plastic brigade or whatever. But I feel good at the end of the day. And I think that's my motivating factor, was when I saw especially the kids' faces light up and want to change the world.
That's pretty special, and I'm sure you did. I mean, I
Yeah.
think the film, I learned so much as well. I mean, like I said, from the receipts, I had no idea that was news to me,
Oh
and I thought,
yeah.
"Oh my gosh, I don't want to touch them anymore now." When I took my receipts after, since then, now I don't take them usually, or they get
Yeah.
emailed, like you said. But I'd have my little white gloves on and not touch them, and then the gloves would turn like really dark from it too. So you get that,
Ooh.
in your skin is your largest organ, and it just totally absorbs. So there's lots to talk about plastic. We could go on and on, but the good news is many more people are aware of it more than ever, whether hopefully more people want to do things about it. And, there might be a little bit of a convenience factor that might be altered, right? For the sense of just the quick, whatever it might be, whether you're ordering from Amazon or, when you go pick up something quick to eat, and what it's the packaging. But more people care and more people want to do better. And we need to find solutions for the plastic pollution, and we need to hold the companies accountable. We need to have more of these bills in place that are coming. So it is kind of an exciting time for plastic pollution in the sense of change. I say whoever creates like the ultimate plastic package or material that, that's truly compostable or truly doesn't harm the earth, like that's the next gazillionaire, right? So what are 3 tips you can give?
The 3 tips I give, I say, start small. So baby steps, and just start with something one a day, and challenge yourself to tell someone. So whether it be on your social media or just calling someone up, having that accountability. I think doing a challenge, maybe it's plastic free July, maybe it's giving up straws for a week, maybe it's just counting your plastic and how much you use. I know, Tiffany, you had your friend Rob Greenfield over, who was carrying his trash with him, his plastic trash on his body, running around spreading awareness. So, maybe
It
it's just
was
like
wild.
collecting and figuring out how much you use. So that accountability, I think, is really good. But yeah, starting small, give yourself something tangible. Otherwise, the eco anxiety can just like be too much. It's like futile. It's like if you think about all the things going on in the world and climate crisis and such. But small wins, little victories every day.
Baby steps are still steps.
Yeah, and I think, like as I mentioned before, progress over perfection. Like we are all works in progress and everything, and to just keep trying.
I think, well, so one of the ones that I discovered this really with COVID, because I couldn't take in my bags, is I would just put everything back in the
Hmm.
shopping cart and wheel it out to the car and pack it in the car.
That's a good one. Yes.
Again, I know that that's extra steps, and some people just aren't going to do it. They just don't have the time. But
You know what I did? I bought these carts. They're like collapsible crates. So they're kind of like these plastic, they're plastic, but they're collapsible. And I got them at Costco. And then I just fold them up and leave them in my car. And then I, assemble that, it just pops together, and I put it in my shopping cart, and I just fill the stuff with it. And then, check out, and then they just put it back in, and then just move the cart into your car. So
oh, that's
you could
easy
do that
too.
as well. And then I just leave it in my car, which is the same as the shopping bag. It's just like less like, carrying stuff. It's just like in more of like a cart with little handles.
Right.
But
That's great. And now there's so much, you were talking about innovation. There's, what I really love is they have these laundry sheets now. So if you think about what laundry, yes, there's the pods, but those and they're in I don't know what the plastic they're wrapped in, but I don't use those. They have laundry detergent sheets, and they come in a box, and then you put them in your washer, and now you don't have a big jug. You don't have to worry about measuring the right amount of, liquid, and it doesn't take up any space. It's awesome. So that's a really good.
They have those tablets too, where it's like concentrated tablets for cleaning, and you can drop it in with water and then mix it, and then you have cleaner. So you could just keep the same bottle and not go back and buy. Because if you think about it, like we buy a lot of things that are just like packaged water, right? With the whatever all-purpose cleaner or whatnot in it. So
yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do now. So no excuses, right? We can all start somewhere.
No excuses. Yes.
I just think we have to take baby steps. There's a lot happening on the use of packaging. And of course, when I go to the recycling center, Amazon, the boxes that are there piled up, not just Amazon boxes, but just shipping boxes, piled mountains. I mean, okay, not plastic, but cardboard, but just from shipping. And I thought,
peanuts,
and there's a way to let Amazon know. Can you let Amazon know? Don't use the plastic envelopes. Can you use something different?
They do have that option now, like the green option. And I have to say, I'd like to buy local and be able to do that more. But as a new mom, it has been very helpful to be able to have things delivered, because sometimes you're just not going to make it to the store. Most of the time, you're not going to make it to the store. So, but yeah, speaking of baby steps, I need to go check up on this baby.
Great.
Because I have a
thank
limited
you for joining
window.
us, Angela's son. Please check out Plastic Paradise, The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It is a relevant movie. It has a lot of information. I mean, I really enjoyed it. And so can everybody still watch it on the same on platforms?
It's on all the digital platforms, whichever one that you like to use. You can, rent it on YouTube, on Vimeo, on our website is probably the best, which is plasticparadisemovie.com. And I do cover a lot of environmental issues for the show that I'm on now, which is California Live on NBC. So you can follow and check it out. I guess everyone's dropping their socials, so follow my socials, I guess, for those stories. But I have been researching a lot of the innovations, which is really exciting.
Yeah. What's your Insta?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should probably tell you what they are. At Sunny Angela is the main one, and at Plastic P Dice, DISE is Plastic Paradise. But yeah, at Sunny Angela is where it's at for all things that I'm up to. But if you have any questions or want to connect or kind of be put in touch with certain organizations or have questions about something, but the plethora of information is on Green with Tiffany, of course. So,
thanks. Well, thanks for joining us and sneaking away from little Kai for a minute.
I hear him cry. I hear him crying. So I gotta go.
I'm gonna let you go. Have a great weekend, and plastic free, peeps. Plastic free
with July. Thank you.
Don't forget to follow us at Green with Tiffany. Follow the community. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please rate, review, subscribe, and share on Apple Podcasts. It would mean the world to me. You can find me at greenwithtiffany.com and on Instagram. Till next time, choose to care.